pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select
Trophy Chase, Arizona.
with the second pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select
Cody Smith, Houston, Texas. The fantasy draft room is now on the clock.
Welcome to the fantasy draft room. I am Chase, and with me as always, my man Cody. What do we got in store for the people today?
We're coming to the end of the rookie evaluation season, so we're going to be looking and breaking down our last go at the top 5 quarterbacks, the top 5 tight ends. One last time before we do get to the NFL draft. We're going to be doing this the next couple of weeks with the running backs and the wide receivers as well. It'll probably get you a full breakdown of the entire class altogether, rankings of that. You know, we've been doing all the mocks, so you've been kind of seeing the rankings, but we want to put a little bit more of a concrete face to it, put our stamp on some of these guys, put them in order for the TFDR rankings. In this video, quarterbacks and tight ends.
Absolutely. And because quarterback and tight end is a little thinner than the other two, it's a lot easier to do a top 5 where we might have to do some top 10 running back type things as well. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Helps us out a ton. So please make sure you subscribe. But yeah, let's kick things off with our QB1. And then this is the TFDR ranking. So our combined QB1 is Anthony Richardson.
Hey, Rich, baby. I know that can cause up a little bit of a tizzy in some other communities because Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are the safe ones, but over here we are playing fantasy football, right? And what do we want for our fantasy quarterbacks? We want rushing upside, and who gives you better rushing upside than literally the most athletic quarterback in the history of the NFL, at least at the combine, probably still the history of the NFL, though.
Yeah, dude is an absolute freak. And I think that's really the big thing when it comes down to the fantasy aspect, right? Like when we're drafting this early, obviously if there's a safe player, it feels good to make sure you have like a QB just locked and loaded. But at the same time, we play for upside. And when you have the rushing ability that we've seen already at the college level from Anthony Richardson, and if he can just improve as a passer, I mean, we saw what, a poor passing grade and poor passing rating that Justin Fields had, but his legs propelled him to top 8 numbers in fantasy. So we can project those types of things to happen for Anthony Richardson. And I don't really know if you can debate that as long as he's on the field.
No, I don't think you can either. But I guess there is the thing of, we all think that Anthony Richardson still needs some development, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that. In NFL circles, fantasy circles, if anybody's telling you that he's ready to step on there as an NFL quarterback day one, I think you're living in a little bit of a fantasy land, not fantasy football land. But so you might not be able to have Anthony Richardson come in and step on the field for your fantasy team week 1 either. And if you are in a little bit more of a QB purgatory position, Anthony Richardson might not be the one for you in your current position, even though we have him at 1. There's really not a lot of separation. I think he does have the most upside, though. And so that's why, regardless of just in a vacuum who I'm going to be taking as my QB1, it will be Anthony Richardson more times than not.
Yeah, and I think that's the right play for those teams. Like you said, for those teams that already have a couple quarterbacks in good position, when it comes to the rest of your lineup, you can take those gambles. But if you need somebody locked and loaded, I feel like our QB2 in this class is really where you got to go. I don't think there's anyone safer than Bryce Young. And, we've seen him do it. I know the size concerns, and that is the big knock on him, but he did do it in the SEC. He did it against SEC, defenses and competition with big offensive linemen, big defensive linemen. Like, his size has been a concern his whole entire time playing. However, he's produced his entire time playing. He has excellent ball skills, great placement with his ball. Like, really can't argue anything that he does. Incredible pocket presence as well for a guy of his size. And, he might not have that same upside, but he's going to be a solid QB2, hopeful back in QB1, maybe get to that Dak range, you think?
I think he could definitely get there. I mean, the guy who went to the same school, Tua. I mean, I think he has a lot of similarities with what his fantasy upside could be with Tua. I think he's very safe, like you said. The obvious concern is the size, though. I mean, he's coming in as like a bottom 2 percentile size guy in the NFL, and it obviously raises some concerns. But the game has evolved to where we're protecting the quarterback. Injury is not my concern with Bryce Young. It is really, can the offense mold around him to be able to get him in some creative looks if he's having trouble seeing down the field. But like you said, he played at Alabama. Like, we're not looking over small guys on the Alabama front line, and we're not looking over small guys on the SEC defensive line either. Like, he has excelled, he has thrived, and he has done it at the highest level at literally the grandstand premiere of all schools, as we see in college right now. And so, I mean, you're talking about a guy who has thrown 79 touchdowns over the last 2 years as a starter for Alabama. He's done it with very few weapons from what we normally see from an Alabama squad as well. He's really elevated that offense more to what they even thought that he could probably be. I mean, we don't even have like a Alabama wide receiver coming out right now that we really like, like he's doing that with he's doing that with a cast of characters that normally we don't see from a school like Alabama. And so I think you put him into any offense. I think he can step on the field day one. Like you said, he's able to read defenses better than I think anybody in this class can. The ball placement, I don't think it's at the level of like a CJ Stroud, but it's a little bit more of a off schedule. He's not even a zero in the running game either. He's kind of a little bit of a scrambler. He can move around in the pocket. He's not ever going to be a Josh Allen, a Daniel Jones type of a rusher, but can he get you that 200, 300 yards throughout the entirety of the season that you see some of these kind of mobile guys get to? I think he can do that. And that also will provide you with a little bit of a nice floor in the running game as well for fantasy.
Yeah, and when you look at some of his other stats, like his big time throws, he leads everyone in this class. So he does make the big throws when he needs to. His completion percentage in college was 65.8, which is pretty solid. You want to see him close to that 65-70% range. So he hits that number as well. And then he did break out at a nice 19-year-old age. Obviously, when you're talking about a quarterback that goes to Alabama, typically that's year one of you playing, not necessarily his freshman year, but you don't expect that from quarterback. So really outstanding player, well-rounded, but maybe doesn't have that same upside as what Anthony Richardson could have, but he could be a very, very efficient quarterback. And we've seen what efficient quarterbacks can do, like Aaron Rodgers. You don't necessarily need massive amounts of volume to be successful. So if he's able to, translate that into the NFL, go to a team that's able to build around him, help develop, we could see some really good things from Bryce Young.
I think we can, and I think that leads us into our quarterback 3 as well. It's going to be CJ Stroud, and truthfully, there's no separation between these two guys for me. If I want to pick the quarterback 2 off the board or the quarterback 3 off the board, and somebody wants to tier up to do that with me, I don't have any issue doing it. As much as I do still think Bryce Young is the safest floor quarterback in this draft, CJ Stroud is right on his heels for that. I mean, we saw him in that Georgia game, obviously take over, obviously show the legs there. So we know he can run. Maybe it's that Ohio system where they don't like the quarterback running as much. Maybe we see that develop, kind of like how we saw Justin Fields really take over the running game when he got to the NFL level as well. I think we could possibly see something not to that level, but similar in evolving his rushing game at the next level as well. So that's going to give you a little bit of a floor, in my opinion. And he, like I said earlier with Bryce Young, he is the best ball placement guy in this entire class, in my opinion. Playing at Ohio State, obviously he has the weapons with him. He's got the offense to do it in. And that's why I think Bryce Young showed me a little bit more to have him up a little bit higher. But man, CJ Stroud, who I still think is going to go number 1 overall in the NFL draft at this point, he's going to be my QB3. But man, there ain't too much close. There ain't too much of a difference between the two.
This is pre-draft process, right? This is kind of where we have them right now. Draft capital will change these things. So, if A-Rich drops to the 20s, we're not necessarily going to have him as QB1, but the upside is still there. And when you talk about the rushing, Ohio State has typically not wanted their quarterbacks to run, as you mentioned, and that's evident in the rushing stats that you'll see. When you're talking about career 10+ yard runs, Bryce Young actually has 26. A-Rich has 30. But he's right behind him there as far as 10+ yard runs. CJ Stroud is at 9. Rushing first downs. CJ Stroud has 14 rushing first downs, and Bryce Young has 32. So yeah, Bryce Young's not a zero on the ground, and we've seen CJ Stroud have mobility. So maybe now that he's in the NFL, they're able to let him have a little more freedom, and we'll see what he can do on the ground a little bit more. But again, he's going to be a situational runner, a guy that is looking to pass first, which is what you want to see. But yeah, he has incredible accuracy. He was almost at that 70% mark. I think he was at 69.3% completion percentage for his career. And when you have weapons that he had to pass to,
certainly helps.
Certainly helps. So yeah, I love CJ Stroud. There's really not much of a difference for me. And I feel like, we talked about, if you don't want to take a risk on A-Rich and you need another safe guy, CJ Stroud could be that situation. If you see Stroud go to a better situation than Bryce Young, and if Stroud is the number 1 overall pick and maybe Bryce Young goes to Houston, or we've heard that maybe they won't take one, but to Indianapolis, depending on those situations and where they actually land, we'll kind of sort things out. But yeah, I'd say it's like a 1 and then like a B and C, or maybe a 2A, 2B for me. I think Anthony Richardson separates himself purely because of that insane rushing upside.
Does separate himself, but still, but again, like you said, depending upon team, I could even see myself taking Bryce Young at the 1 or CJ. I mean, personally, I'm gonna have Bryce Young over him at this point. But yeah, like you said, we're still early in the process. We've still got some things to shake out. But we'll see when we get to the draft. And then now we move into the guys, we move into our 4. This is where it gets a little bit shaky. And this is where there's a lot of split in the dynasty community right now, the fantasy football community, and I think even the NFL community as it stands right now. Will Levis is going to come in as our quarterback 4, though, playing out of Kentucky, 5-guy year, actually, because he did a redshirt year at Penn State as well before transferring to Kentucky. Actually, I think he showed a lot more promise before this year. I think this year really did a little bit of damage to him, losing some of his weapons and some of the guys coming out of Kentucky last year. Offensive line was horrible for him. We believe he was pretty seriously injured going throughout this year, and you can see that in some of his stat line as well. The completion percentage isn't going to be like that we saw from Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. He does have a lot of development to do, but you're just looking for that stand back in the pocket passing quarterback who's going to have that rocket arm. We're not going to say that Josh Allen type, that molded type where he has the skills, the traits and abilities, but it just has to really be shown how to put it all together at the NFL level. Will Levis is the guy that I think has that a little bit of upside, but he's still going to definitely be a project for that NFL team that does take the shot on him.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Josh Allen mold, 6'3", 230, big dude. And we all saw the combine. He looked jacked. He's, physically in shape. But yeah, I believe he had a foot injury, and they actually said that he had he was playing with a metal plate in his shoe, or there was something like that. He actually had to play in his shoe all season long. And you mentioned the depletion of weapons. He didn't have Wan'Dale Robinson there. He had some freshmen that kind of showed promise, but again, they are just freshmen, and that offensive line was abysmal. So there were a lot of things really working against him. But when you have a 2022 or 2021 season, so his junior year, he had 2,800 yards passing, 66% completion percentage. We kind of all, wanted to see a step forward before he came out. And since we didn't see that, now everyone doubts what he is. I still think he's a very good player. He might end up being the best quarterback in this class, because I think next to Anthony Richardson, he has that rushing upside and that rushing ability, unlike anybody else. And for me, that definitely stands out. So we'll see. Again, situation, he does need some development. There is some refinement that needs to happen for him to be successful. And we've seen him drafted to the Raiders. Jimmy G's there, sitting a year. Is that good for him? it might be a good situation, right? They have weapons and things like that. So maybe that would be good, or at least give him a good chunk of the year before stepping foot on the field. But yeah, right now, QB4, that's pretty standard for us. I think it's a pretty big gap between 3 and 4 for right now.
Yeah, definitely a big gap between 3 and 4. But I think the thing that a lot of people are missing potentially with Will Levis for fantasy purposes is that rushing upside that you talked about. I think he is by far and away the second rusher in this class behind Anthony Richardson out in our top 5 at least. And I think that was a lot to do because of the injury. I mean, you're looking back at 2021, he had 107 rushing attempts for 376 yards. You look at that at year 2, and because college takes your sacks into account for your rushing total, 72 rushing attempts for negative 107 yards. So he's sitting back in the pocket back there, getting crushed by a bad offensive line. Is it a little bit of his fault for taking the sacks? I mean, some of them maybe, but you're playing hurt. Your offensive line's hurt, and they're getting you killed back there. Yeah. It's hard to put up a lot of rushing attack. It's hard to get out of the pocket. It's just hard to have designed runs for him if he's doing those as well. And so I think the rushing element is a big thing that a lot of people are missing from the Will Levis fantasy value. And I do believe that he still has, he's got that rocket arm. If you hone in some of the mechanics to get to some of those accuracy issues, turn the turnovers down, help him start to really progress through the motions, developing as a passer at the next level, I think he still has a lot of hidden upside that some people just are missing a little bit.
Yeah, the ADP that we've seen in the destination Devy community has typically been around that 107 range. So he's about the 6th to 7th pick off the board. In other communities, you will see him go all the way into the 2nd. And I know draft capital will mean something there, but I do think that when you have a first round quarterback like he's projected to be, it's really hard for me to pass on what Will Levis could be, especially if the NFL believes in him. Let's stop thinking that we in the fantasy world are smarter than the people in the NFL. We're not. And if the NFL believes in him, I'm going to believe in him too, and I will have no problem taking him, especially if he's going to slide to me in the 7th pick.
Yeah, I'm fully about that as well. I will just say, though, they're not smart either. So that is the thing. I'm not saying we're smarter than them, but they're not smart either. We're all dumb out here. I don't think anybody can really go out there and say that they are a true evaluator of the quarterback position, because so much of it is just mental at the next level. Who knows if he's going to have that fight in him, that ability to start processing, that ability to evolve within an NFL offense, an NFL scheme, and play at the next level when everything speeds up so much. It's a hard step to take, but we'll see if Will Levis can get there. He is our 4, though, and then that only leaves the number 5, and that is the guy who I actually at one point did have pretty good above Will Levis, and that is Hendon Hooker, the quarterback out of Tennessee. Unfortunately, you are dealing with the ACL tear, though, right? And that's the big thing, the reason why he's been projected in the 2nd round, but we have seen some rumblings come out that he could be a back end of the 1st round pick right now, with some teams really liking the stuff. I mean, he is older. He's a little bit more matured. He seems to be crushing interviews and everything like that. And so I really like the kid from everything that I've seen there. And he was on an incredible pace, a Heisman candidate pace before he got injured his last year at Tennessee. And people will say it's the offense, say it's the scheme, but I don't really care, man. You're doing that at the SEC level, passing for 31, 35, and 27 touchdowns in his time there at Tennessee before he did get hurt, and only 27 touchdowns, 2 INTs. Like, man, I don't care what it is of the offense. He was good before he got hurt, and I really think that he would be up there with the rest of these guys if it hadn't happened to him this year.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the NFL views him. If there is a team that does trade up into the back of the 1st, because that has been the rumors as of recent. If those types of things do happen, I feel like, we talked about the range for the first 4 quarterbacks. Like, those guys, for me, I'm taking them, basically 101 through 105 is how I would look at it. Bijan belongs in that mix. And we've seen Levis slide. Hooker, we've seen in the 2nd and the 3rd. If he does go in the 1st round of the NFL draft, even if it's the back end first, just someone trades up for the 5th-year option, how high would you be willing to take him, or where's that like comfort range for you?
I think it has to deal a lot with the rest of the prospects in this class. Once we get to the running back and the wide receiver rooms, because I could consider taking him at that like 111 mark, just because depending upon what the NFL draft tells us with the capital of some of these other guys, the landing spots, whenever we evaluate those, I don't feel comfortable with a lot of the guys back there. And so if I really just want to take the shot in super flex, hopefully he lands in a spot where, it's not a just completely lost year one for him. And maybe he can take over at the second half of the season after going on pup, probably at the beginning of the season. Maybe he can step in, sit behind a vet, and then take over eventually. It's interesting. While I don't really like, the Raiders for Will Levis potentially, I kind of actually do like it for Hendon Hooker if they were to take him possibly in the second or trade back up into the end of the first possibly to get him. So we'll see with him. It's obviously the injury is going to be a thing to monitor still as we go throughout this process up until and through the draft. And I think the draft capital will tell us a lot about how the NFL teams feel about that injury.
Yep. Injury and age have been the biggest knocks on him. Whether or not you value or other people value the age aspect of it, at this point, I don't care. If the NFL believes in him, we're gonna take a crack at it. If he does go in the second round, though, even if it's to the Raiders, I feel like my comfort zone, like I would go as high as the 111, depending on some of the other landing spots of these skill players. But most likely, I'd say that 201 to 205 range most likely is where I personally would feel comfortable doing it. I know I wasn't as high on Hooker as you were at the time, but if it's a first round quarterback with some of the projected draft capital we've seen of the other players, that second round is not an issue for me at all.
No, I don't think it can be. And you want to get into some of the honorable mentions that we can just run through real quick before we do go move on into the tight ends.
Yeah, well, it's Max Duggan, Stetson Bennett, Tanner McKee, I believe Jaron Hall.
Some DTR for you if you're into that.
Yeah, if you're into that kind of thing.
It's going to be, if any of these guys, if I'm taking any of them, it'll be back of the fourth probably, and it will just be because I think they have a shot to get on the field year one.
Yep. Maybe they end up in a Tennessee or a spot where there's a quarterback controversy already. That would be something to consider, but they're not like I'm going to suddenly put them into the third round, second round for any sort of consideration, barring some sort of miracle and them getting like second round draft capital in a perfect situation. Like that would make me potentially rethink it, at least in the third. But yeah, that let's not get crazy with this conversation today. Those guys are just darts at this point. Fourth round stabs, hope for the best. Maybe Stetson Bennett can get a Brock Purdy opportunity and in a good system and start somewhere. That's pretty much all you're looking for.
You can take that shot, but it's probably not a very good bet. Brock Purdy's don't come around 1 out of every 100 times even. So I'm not taking that bet unless the NFL tells me I should take that bet on a different quarterback. But with that, let's move into our tight end rankings. And I don't think there's another guy for me personally that we can start off this list with, other than the guy out of Notre Dame who put up just some unreal numbers during his time there. Michael Mayer is our tight end one.
Yeah. It's really, really hard. Like as we started going through these rankings, like there's some guys that are more athletic, some guys that, you can see being really prolific at the NFL level. But with what Michael Mayer has done, how dominant he was from his true freshman season to coming out, I just, there's nothing else I can say. I mean, he had a 33% college dominator rate. His weighted dominator rating was 31. He had his PFF grades were constantly in the 90s. He garnered 100 targets, at the college level as a tight end. You just don't see those types of things. Like the dude gets open, right? And that's the whole thing. Like I know the Notre Dame offense is a little bit different, but no matter how you view it, he played insanely well. And I know college production doesn't necessarily translate, meaning NFL success, but he's done it at every single level. I have no reason to doubt him. And he's the one I have the least amount of questions on when it comes to these tight ends.
Yeah, it's kind of like how we look at that floor with the quarterbacks, right? Like, Michael Mayer's going to get you a floor. He's going to play day one, and he's going to be on the field for a large majority of snaps day one. So tight end is a lot about how the offense uses him, so it will be a lot of landing spot dependent. I mean, even as much as I like Michael Mayer, he might not be my one post draft.
Right.
I think there's a lot of guys that could be there. This class is loaded with talent. Like you said, more athletic guys, but I personally just can't move off of that college production profile, even though it's not predictive of future, NFL success over a large sample size. Michael Mayer was incredibly productive the entirety of that Notre Dame offense. So Michael Mayer will be my one, but let's get into one of those athletic guys. It's got a little bit of a concern with him as well. Number 2 will be Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah.
Yeah, and talk about another guy that was able to garner targets and was graded out really well by PFF. He had another 91 as well, 91.8. So actually a little bit better than Michael Mayer as far as their best PFF grade throughout their college career. Doesn't quite have the all-around production that Michael Mayer does, but his senior year, he did get, I think, 70 targets, 890 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He does have the back injury concern. That is the big thing that has been knocking him. Didn't test at the combine, didn't play in their bowl game because I believe it happened in the Pac-12 championship, game this year. So Dalton Kincaid's injuries are kind of the concern. However, if he is healthy, I honestly could see him being the first tight end off the board. And, his average dominator rating, in comparison, like the average dominator rating for Michael Mayer was 23. Kincaid is 18, and then there's no one that's even remotely close. I guess there's one that's close. We'll get into them in a little bit, but those two separate themselves, and his athletic profile from what you can see him do, he also profiles very, very well. 6'4", 246, another big dude that at the tight end position.
Yeah, just another guy that I'll let the NFL draft tell me what they think about his injury. They're the ones that are going to have the medicals on him. They're the ones that are going to put their trust into him. Obviously, we would have loved to have seen him test because he probably would have tested very, very well. As well, we had every tight end out here at the combine testing very, very well. So I don't know how much you can separate yourself from a perfect 10 RAS score, but we'll get into, actually, let's just roll right into him, I guess. Tight end 3 of the class for us is going to be a perfect 10 RAS score, Darnell Washington. I'm sorry, he's not the perfect 10 RAS score. He's almost the perfect 10 RAS score. He's 998.
Yeah, it was close enough. But when you're 6'7" and 260 pounds, just an absolute freak athlete for that size. He blocks like a lineman, like legitimately blocks like a lineman. He's going to push dudes around. So he's going to be on the field, which is what you want from your tight end. The concern is, will the NFL use him as a blocking tight end only and then use him as a red zone target, which is fine for fantasy. Like, it's fine. It's not great. You're not going to expect him to get 100 to 120 targets, anything like that. But he can do it all. So if he's on the field, that's what you can ask for. Kittle can do it all as well. And you see him being, top 5 tight end year in and year out.
Yeah, it's why for me personally, although I did tease you all with that Zach Kuntz one, you thought that perfect 10 RAS score tight end number 3 off the board was going to be Zach Kuntz. No. Darnell Washington, though, being that close to him, he's more athletic than I thought he would be, at least in terms of just a RAS score, which is what we find most predictive in the tight end ranks for just fantasy football production. And it's why he's risen up for a lot for me throughout this process, from where I was like, oh no, he's basically going to be an offensive lineman convert. I don't think you're putting a guy that is that athletic and just locking him into that role without using some of that athleticism for your offense, man. I am a little bit more comfortable taking him in like that best ball format because, like you did say, maybe he is a little bit more inside and then they put him out in the red zone to catch the touchdowns, maybe like a Mercedes Lewis type. But I think his athleticism and the way the offenses right now in the NFL are using the tight end position, dependent upon where he goes and what system he's in, I could see him being a lot more than that. And I'm really excited about the upside of Darnell Washington.
Yeah, the issue, I don't say it's production profile necessarily. He didn't get to produce a lot. His best season, he only garnered 43 targets, which is okay. The big thing is you have a guy like Brock Bowers in front of you. And when you have someone who is considered, I don't say a generational tight end, we use that word way too flippant, but like he's a top tier, unquestioned, like first round draft pick tight end next year. And he is a move tight end who you get him the ball because he's incredible with the ball in his hands. I get it. I get what Georgia was doing. And then when you have him in there blocking for that Georgia run game, yeah, you use him differently. And that is why, this is exactly why college production doesn't always translate to NFL success. So you're going to see guys that don't necessarily have, prolific college profiles in terms of their production, but they're athletic. And if they can learn the new system, learn what their new team wants them to do, they can succeed. And Darnell Washington has all the tools, all the skills and abilities to be on the field day one. And that's what you're looking for. That's all you can ask for out of your tight end.
I think so. And then let's go and take that one right into our number 4 tight end. And it's going to be another guy who kind of is the same way. He doesn't have a lot of the production profile in the college level, but he's incredibly athletic as well. And that's going to be Luke Musgrave, standout from the Senior Bowl. All 4 years at Oregon State, but he only played 2 games in his senior year, 10 games in his junior year. He just hasn't been on the field much. And so you're looking at a guy that only has 47 receptions in 4 years of college, and you're looking at like, what is happening here? I mean, I know that Oregon State offense isn't nothing to write home about, but why are you only producing this much if we're really going to see you at the next level? And it is, again, just that athletic upside. We're looking at the RAS score here, and it'll be a lot of landing spot dependent upon, for me, in draft capital dependent of where I have Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, he is the nephew of Bill Musgrave, who is the longtime NFL assistant coach that you've probably heard of throughout the NFL. So he's got family ties in the NFL. Is an absolute athletic freak, but I don't really know that, it's still incomplete on him for me. And I feel like that's the issue, is not because, just the production. I just don't know really what he can do other than him being athletic, which is great. The NFL seems like they believe in him, where they're going to take him in the first or second round of the NFL draft. And that's probably going to be enough for me to invest in him in my fantasy teams. But that's kind of the concern. But again, another guy that could land in a situation that vaults him to the top. I think that's the big thing. We talk about it all the time. Landing spot is probably the most important thing for these tight ends. Draft capital is important, but it's not as key for tight end success when it translates to the NFL. It's going to be about opportunity. Can you get on the field early, and are they going to give the tight end the ball? That's truly what it comes down to. So, we talk about the dream scenarios of the Chargers, and if he goes there and can be their slot guy to kind of replace Keenan Allen in the future, that might be something of interest. But for right now, I think tight end 4, he's fast, he's big. There's really nothing else to it.
He's got the traits.
He's got the traits. That's really what you're looking for. And so we'll put him here at tight end 4. Another guy, final guy, top 5, wrapping it up. I hate talking about him, but Iowa Mike, big old Mike over there from 4D from South Harmon, talked up Sam Laporta pre-com, like even before the combine, was saying, just wait and see. Goes out, runs a 4.5. He's athletic. He was another one that actually was able to put up some solid dominator ratings or solid production profile at Iowa. And we're talking about an Iowa team that doesn't necessarily have much of an offense. So when you're getting a 30% target share target share in an Iowa offense, I know you don't really have anyone to throw to, but he was out there. They split him out as a wide receiver. You see him move all over, and the pedigree of an Iowa tight end can't be overlooked at this point. That is a tight end factory for the NFL.
Yeah, we see, tight end 4 currently, TJ Hawkinson, the upside that we still see with Noah Fant. It holds a lot of value to have that sticker on the side of your helmet as you were coming out of college from Iowa. And, talk about dominator rating. Yeah, I mean, he's got the 30%, but whenever your offense is only passing for 2,000 yards, it doesn't mean quite as much to me, but I'm not trying to knock him for that.
Got
too.
90 targets. That's solid.
He actually did have a very good production profile. Yeah. So, he was more athletic than I think all the rest of us thought. And I think that's why we have vaulted him up with that Iowa helmet, with the pedigree and with the production profile that we have seen. I think that's why he's going to come in as our tight end 5.
Yeah, and again, it can be separated. Like I kind of include Sam Laporta with, I'll kind of bring up the rest, which is Tucker Kraft, Will Mallory, Zach Kuntz. Like you mentioned Zach Kuntz earlier in his perfect RAS score, just athletic tight ends that can move around. Tucker Kraft, same thing, but small school guys like Zach Kuntz. Most people don't even know the name, went to Old Dominion. I didn't even know who the heck he was going into the process. And it's like, this dude's a perfect 10 RAS score. Like, all right, I guess we got to figure out who's hiding the Old Dominion tape for me to find, to look at. But yeah, he kind of belongs a little bit with that group, but he separates himself because of that pedigree. And then it sounds like he's going to get capital too. We've seen him mocked in the second rounds of NFL drafts too.
Yep, he's got that pedigree, and like you said, we've got the rest of these guys we can get out of here on Tucker Kraft, Will Mallory, Zach Kuntz. Just take your athletic dart throws. Let the NFL tell you which one of these guys has the chance, has the opportunity to get on the field. Believe in the RAS score, and hopefully it pays off in year 1, year 2, year 3, and if not, re-roll it into the next guys that come out the next year.
Yep, exactly. And that's really what you got to do with the tight end position. Draft capital doesn't mean everything, but it is important to a point. So as that shakes out and we find out what kind of opportunities these guys land in, we will shake up our overall rankings and kind of give you guys some good draft tools to use as we roll into our rookie draft season. So anything you want to wrap up here with these quarterbacks and tight ends before we get out of here?
I don't got anything else with them. There's not too many others that are ever going to be fantasy relevant, more than likely. So I think we can get out of there on these lists.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Again, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps us out a ton. Again, thank you so much for checking this out and joining us here in the Fantasy Draft Room.